Unless you're acting authentically, you're acting inauthentically. And if you're inauthentic for long enough, you'll be lost, even if it's tiny little decisions like going out when you don't want to go out, having sex when you don't feel like having sex, not thinking about what you're eating or how that makes you feel. All those little things can eventually lead to you not really understanding the person within. There is no middle ground.
I would love to start right off the bat by giving a brief overview of existential therapy.
Sure, yeah. So existential therapy sounds a lot fancier than it is. All it means is that it's a certain type of modality of therapy that is rooted in philosophy, specifically existential philosophy. And so a lot of how we operate or how we understand human suffering is through the lens of individuals having the free will to make choices in their life, needing to find meaning and determining essentially what their future looks like. And so this is how a lot of existential therapists will approach their clients and try to understand the suffering.
What drew you into it?
I think a lot of my early childhood experiences are why I leaned so heavily into existentialism. I think, living through wars at a super young age makes you question humanity, makes you question purpose, makes you question life a lot sooner. Like I started reading Dostoevsky when I was 9. Because I felt like the books that my friends were reading in Canada were just not resonating about anything. And so I found such deep resonance with someone who was questioning why they were alive or what was the ethics of murder, for example, because I saw war and I saw people lose their lives. And I think for me it was, how is this possible? Why does this happen? Why do people do this to one another? And so I think those big questions of like, who am I and why am I here kind of lingered from a young age. And then I found existentialism and I was like, this is it.
This is it. This is where I'm meant to be.
This is my jam. Yeah.
So you wrote this book, It's On Me, that is out on September 19, which is also my birthday. So I'm taking it as a sign. I love this book. I really did. And I'm very critical with books like this because there's a lot of fluff out there.
I know you are.
I'm going to start with the first question, which is the concept of the self, because I feel like it's a very abstract, thing to think about. How would you define the self from an existential therapy perspective?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. We assume because we are us that we know what the self is or that we possess the self, and that's not always the case. And I think the simplest way to define the self is a combination of responsibility, choice, and freedom. Yourself is how you act. You cannot differentiate the way you show up in the world with who you are. And I think that that's a really startling kind of fact where people are like, well, I'm actually this way despite the fact I showed up that way. And I think at some point that stops being true. Like, yes, of course, we can all have inauthentic moments, so moments that lack resonance or cohesion with ourselves. But if those moments persist, eventually you're not just being unauthentic, you're completely lost. You've lost an understanding of who you are. You can't even, I think the way that I differentiate it is, let's say you're inauthentic. That means that you are swimming underwater. And you're swimming away from the surface, you're swimming away, but you can always detect where the surface is. You know it's above you. You know that if you wanted to turn around, you can. And you kind of see the light, right? Metaphorical light. Self-loss is when you're in a riptide and you are being caught and you are just spinning underwater and you realize that to survive, you need to start swimming, but you have no idea where to swim. So you have no idea if that action is authentic or inauthentic. You've lost your ability to even sense that alliance. That's where self-loss is. It's not being able to answer who am I, doing actions and then not being able to recognize yourself in those actions or not knowing why you did those actions.
How do you define the self specifically?
I'm like, and that is self-loss.
Because that was my next question. What is self-love? What is self-loss? But I wanted, I want to touch specifically on the self. Yeah.
I define it as an act of creation. Really, that's what it is. It's an act of possession through creation. So, which is a very philosophical kind of answer, but I don't think there is a simple answer. The self is what you create through responsibility. That's it.
I love that. That's what I needed, that simple, okay, now I have the concept What would you say causes self-loss?
One way I define self-loss, which I haven't said, is like our failed responsibility to be. And I think that puts a lot of onus on us. And what causes self-loss is our actions. So I talk about like, there are three things that might cause self-loss, and, some of them are big events. So for example, I experienced trauma really early on in my life. But saying that trauma caused my self-loss would not be correct. I think it set a foundation for it. It started self-loss, but the fact that it persisted onto my mid-20s wasn't because of my trauma. It was because of my daily decisions. It was because of how I chose to show up every day. And yes, part of that was not knowing any better. Part of that was acting from a place of my wounds. But I think what causes self-loss is our actions. I don't think that we can only be victims to self-loss. I think that we have to participate for it truly to be self-loss and to be sustained self-loss. So the simplest answer there is our actions. What causes self-loss is how you're acting every single day.
I marked this specific paragraph in the book that says the paradox of this loss is that although it often goes unnoticed, it still involves our will. Which I felt was very powerful and speaks to the point you just made, that it is an active participation that we're taking in losing ourselves.
And I think the saddest part is when we don't realize we're doing it. Like, I don't think it's intentional. I don't think it's lazy. I do think that we hide away from the truth. We want the ignorance, I think, to some extent, but I don't think it's ill-intentioned. So many of us make decisions that we don't realize are leading us to self-loss. And that's because we haven't talked about this term. It's so fascinating to me that, therapy, which revolves around the self, the human that is sitting in front of you, has not talked about what the self actually means. Or if someone is healing, what are they healing? Who are they healing? Is it just the symptoms, or is it the being within the symptoms, the essence that's there? And I think it's so fascinating that as a society, we don't talk about the concept of self. That was my tantrum on that.
I love it. So let's talk about how self-loss manifests. You see, I'm so programmed to talk about self-love.
I know.
That it automatically goes into that word. I love that the conversation of self-loss, you bringing it to the table, and more people will hopefully start talking about it. So let's talk about how self-loss manifests itself. And while you're sharing that from your as a therapist experience, I would love to hear your personal experience, because that's something you shared in the book.
Yeah. So how does it manifest? I think holistically is probably the quickest way to summarize that. I think we end up having really strange relationships with our emotions in terms of not knowing what our emotions are, or always being so overwhelmed by them because we're not sure what they're communicating and not being able to manage them. Our bodies, self-loss in the body is a really big topic, but in terms of like not understanding what your body actually is, and not listening to your body, not taking your body seriously, it manifests in relationships, because if you don't know who you are, how are you going to select a partner that actually works for you? And more than that, who is your partner having a relationship with? Because if it's not the self of you, what is it? Is it a projection? Is it an assumption? Is it a hope? Is it a mask? They're not actually in a relationship with you, which makes relationships incredibly challenging. And then I think I talk about it manifests in the inner consent, which is another existential term of like the ability to give yourself permission or agreement or like a yes to life. That means like, this is right, this is correct. And you won't have that feeling. You won't have that confirmation. You won't have that confidence because you won't know if it aligns or not. And the last one is morality. So meaning and morality, right? Meaning is a really big topic as well, but you won't know what your meaning in life is. Like, how would you know what meaning aligns? How would you know what is moral or not moral? I think something we also don't talk about as a society is the impact on morality and your sense of self, which is something I studied in my MA and my doctorate of when people violate their morality, they violate their sense of self. They no longer have a sense of self. They shatter their sense of self. And so this is a really interesting connection as well. And so these are all the ways in which it impacts it. And I think I have an example there about Julia Roberts in the movie like Runaway Bride, where the reporter is doing a story on her because she kind of always leaves during, like, runs away during weddings, and it was like her sixth wedding or something, and he heard about it and wanted to do a story, and then they get to know each other and he yells at her in the parking lot and he's like, you don't even know who you are, like you don't even know what kind of eggs you like. And I loved that example because it's as basic as that. I think sometimes you have those tiny moments where you're like, oh my God, I don't even know what kind of eggs I like. And it's so insignificant, but I think it really speaks to that bigger problem. So it's not like you have to experience a huge like trauma. It's not like you have to experience what I experienced, which was like a massive panic attack to go, I don't know who the fuck I am. Like I absolutely have no idea. And I don't even know why I'm living right now. I think it can be really cute little moments.
Looking back now, do you see any other signs you could have picked up on that would have indicated that you're in that place?
I don't know. The reason why I'm saying I don't know is because going from such a traumatic event and then just kind of being numb afterwards, I don't think I knew anything else was possible. Like, it was a very weird thing where no one taught me, like, hey, this is how you could be feeling, aka this is how you should be feeling. And so I think a bit of that, and that's not me avoiding responsibility. It's just like there were probably so many signs. Like I thought I was depressed. I was an angry teenager. Like it was so many, but people just chalked it up to like being moody, being a teen, moving so much, new transitions. And I chalked it up to that as well. But that's because I didn't understand there was something a lot more, my rash decisions of like running into a marriage, like all of that now. I'm like, wow, that really speaks to my self-loss. But I didn't know what self-loss was, so I couldn't identify it. And that's something I hope this book changes, is it's really hard to know what you don't know. So I had all the symptoms, right? But I had no idea what they were actually saying or what they meant. And so looking back, I'm like, my whole life is riddled with signs that I was lost, but I just couldn't read them.
I mean, you don't know what you don't know. I love this part. I also highlighted it. The question, who am I, has to be answered in the present moment, and it will change with every choice and exercise of our human freedom. It's important for us to realize that our task is not to go back and try to find who we used to be. Mm-hmm. That one hit home for me because I feel like in so many different aspects of my life and the changes that I've gone through up until recently, I always try to like find who I was again. And I didn't give myself the permission to let go of that version and now focus on the present version and what's going on right now. While I was reading this, I also, I was looking at my phone and I had this quote saved on my phone by Joanne Didion, where it said, I've already lost touch with a few people that I used to be. And to me, all of it was just all happened at the same time. And I absolutely love this. How can we recognize when we are holding on to an old version? And how do we, I guess, restructure our minds to let go of that and start focusing on here and now?
Yeah, I'm so glad you like that. I think that was my own journey too. I think there's so much out there talking about finding the self, which I think then gives us the idea that it already exists and all you need to do is like pick it up. And that's just not how it works. And it also indicates that it's in the past somewhere for most of us. It's like, okay, find it. Like when is the last time you had it? And that's also kind of an issue of like, remember the last time you felt this way? And then people are like, I want to have that. And it's like, you will never have that again. And there is loss. Like, you have to grieve your old versions, even if there were amazing versions of you that you respect and have served you so well. You need to understand that it's fluid. It's like water. You can never step into the same water twice if it's like a moving creek. Like, you have to understand that it is constantly evolving, which is sad and sometimes nerve-wracking to be like, I need to constantly be creating something new. But it's also incredibly empowering and fun. Like, life should, I think life needs to be about living, about experiencing, about tasting, about enjoying. It is not just a task that you get by and then you die. And if it is, that I think that's really sad. That's very meaningless. So I think understanding that yourself is constantly created is incredibly fun, I think. And hopefully others will think too. And I think you can go, that's who I was. Who do I want to be now? What a fun question. I think so many of us are imprisoned by who we were, even if that was a really good version of us. And maybe that's not a version that we want to be anymore. And so if there are aspects of who you were that you liked, you can bring them along. I'm not saying kill every old version of yourself, but you get to pick and choose and be really selective. And so right now you go, okay, I'm Valeria. I'm sitting in my studio. I'm doing a podcast. Like, who am I? You're like, I'm feeling that. It's like, who am I in this moment? Who do I want to become in this moment? Okay, I want to be an empowered, intelligent, whatever woman. Okay, so what kind of questions do I ask? How do I sit? How do I posture myself? How do I breathe? And it's a really fun exercise of like, who do I want to be? Great, act like it. I say that all the time. It's like, who do you want to be? If you have that visual, now act like it. Make decisions that are in line with this new version. And I think that there's something really fun.
To me, when I read this, it kind of validated a thought that I've had, because I didn't realize I've been doing this practice of literally, I stopped doing all the good habits every single day that I used to do. So I would wake up and I would have my cup of coffee and I would do a meditation and I'd do an exercise. And I was, because in my head, this is why I'm being the best version of myself. But something happened one day where I woke up and I'm like, I don't want to do this. This is great. This is nice. It's beneficial, but I kind of want to stop. I kind of want to put myself in a different environment. How is it going to make me feel? What am I going to do? How my, train thought, where is it going to go? And that was so refreshing to me. And until recently, I mean, I would look at it as more of I'm being lazy. I'm not showing up for myself. But that was for me how I showed up for the present self. Like the present self wanted to explore what other things go through my mind if I'm not, in the kind of cycle of the same habits over and over again, even if they're positive ones.
I love that. And I think habits are great as long as they don't become a cage. When we become so habitual, we stop being curious about who we are in the moment. And we just work off an old version of ourselves. And I think that's an issue with habits or even healthy routines sometimes, is not having the space to go like, does this still feel right? Like, do I still want to be doing this? Is this how I'm going to explore and express myself? Because it is about self-expression. And so I think we've kind of overcorrected and we're like, everyone needs to do this 10-step morning routine and whatever. But what you've done for those 10 minutes for most people is absolutely ignore your sense of self and not express your sense of self. And so what most people are doing is actually being inauthentic for the first 10 minutes of their lives, which is really, or their mornings, sorry. So I think it's really fascinating. And I think it's really amazing that you kind of woke up and like, I don't want to do this anymore, because I wish more people did that. I wish more people gave themselves the freedom.
I was sitting for a podcast recording and someone asked me, what is your morning routine? And something just in me was like, ugh. I'm like, absolutely nothing. I actually have no morning routine. I just wake up and I'm like, I'm going through a detox of morning routine. So I don't have an answer for that. That was very refreshing. Mm-hmm. So speaking of authenticity, because again, a term that is thrown out there so much, I would love to hear about the definition. What to you is, what is authenticity?
So Sartre's definition makes me so happy. Where he's like feeling the full weight of your freedom. And I'm just like, oh my God, how amazing is that? And, he has that story of a young man coming to him and going, what is the right decision? What is the authentic decision? And I won't go into like what the story was, but essentially Sartre said like, the right decision is the one you make. The authentic decision is the one that you make, the one that you own, the one that makes sense for you. That is the only authentic decision. That is the only right decision for you. And I think that that's really great. Like that is so liberating, but I think people misuse authenticity in terms of I do whatever I want, or someone's super rude and they're like, I'm just being authentic. It's like, no, you're being an asshole. There's a difference. Like authenticity is not like free for all. I do this because it feels good. I do this because like it's not like a self-gratifying thing. It's a self-attunement thing, and it's taking responsibility for every single action you do. And so I think authenticity is actually it's ownership. I think like the German Heidegger, when he talks about it, like the German word for that is like to own oneself. And so when you look at it that way, I think authenticity gives a completely different vibe than what we're seeing right now, which is like, I like it. And like, it feels right in the moment, but it's not like, are you owning this decision? Is it helping you be the best version of yourself? Are you feeling the weight of your freedom? And is this exactly how you're choosing to use that freedom? Because that's intense. And so that's how I see authenticity.
I love that. I feel like it gives it more weight. Like you don't, with that definition, I don't want to throw that term as loosely as it's thrown these days. I highlighted this thing. I highlighted a lot, as you can see. Figuring out who I am requires an attitude of understanding that I am, in essence, unfathomable.
Mm-hmm.
Simply put, this means that the person we are will continue to change and evolve. It's a hard truth here. It's a hard one to own. The beautiful and possibly frustrating thing about being human, we are impossible to pin down. Love that. Made me feel so nice and liberating and lighter. Our ultimate essence is always ahead of us, and we will never completely be it. How do we go about it? Because I feel like this one is a little harder to accept, especially in today's landscape of us constantly trying to resolve the traumas and find the authentic self and the self and all the things. We're trying to like reach a certain, place, but accepting that we will never really get there is a bit of a hard pill to swallow.
It's a hard pill to swallow that I hope leads to liberation. It's both. I hope. I think we need to understand that your sense of self is not completed. Like if there's always more to it that you cannot grasp in the present moment, right? And I think that that's really cool. So many philosophers talk about like your sense of self is a combination of what is and what is to come. And so that part of what is to come, you cannot grasp yet. And how amazing is that if you developed, let's say you were like, I did the inner child work, I did the trauma work. Let's say that you are working really, really hard on figuring out your previous traumas, your inner child, you're doing all the routines, you're doing all the boundaries, which, by the way, all have a really significant role in our lives. And that is not something to scoff at. I think it's all really important work. You're still, and let's say you reach that pinnacle at 25. How would you feel if at 65 you were exactly the same person? I would be concerned because you shouldn't stay stagnant, because that means you're not reaching yourself. Yourself is constantly evolving in the future, and you need to go behind it and grasp as much as you can with the new experiences that then every single experience expands you. Every single experience shapes you. And I think there's something so wonderful about that. So the experiences you haven't had yet are there to expand you and shape you and mold you. And you get to decide how they impact you. And that's the part that we can't grasp all at once. But that's also the part that makes life worth living, in my opinion. Because that is like, it's a constant, it's like a piece of art that, or like a movie. Have you ever read a really good book that you don't want it to end? And you're going to be so sad when the book ends. That's with life. That's the feeling we should have of like, okay, no, but we want like a little more. What else happens? How else does the character kind of change? And who else do they connect with? Because when the book ends, we die. And I hope that we die. But I really hope that it's kind of that sensation of like, we're constantly grasping and we're never going to fully grasp it, until we die.
Is there anything, because we talk about how the self is, who you are in the moment and constantly changing. The essence is something we could never really reach because it's always ahead of us. Is there anything that doesn't change? So let's say when we're a young adult, like, is there something that is part of who we are that lasts a lifetime?
I mean, yes, you'll have personality traits, but I do believe that we can choose to lean into them or not. There's going to be tendencies, there's going to be, maybe predisposition for certain mental health struggles. Like, there are things that we can't change. There are things that are givens. Your height might not change from when you're 20 to when you're 80. And I think there's things that life gives us that it's like you need to accept that it's given it to you, but at the same time, you get to choose what to do with it and what your relationship with it is. I definitely think that there's pieces of us that we carry on from childhood till the day we die. But I also think that that's more of a choice than we think.
So the answer is no. You're constantly changing. Every day you wake up, you're someone new. Choose wisely. I mean, I'm here for it.
Yeah, you're not just like throwing old stuff away. It's like it does build on one another. Like that, it's like the painting. Every time you put a new layer, it's not like the other layers disappear. They just are not as prominent. They're not the focal point anymore. They're just in the background. And so you're constantly building upon yourself. You're not discarding and then starting over. So I think that's an important distinction.
To me, I look at it as like a structure of a house. So the concrete is there and the floors can be changed, maybe it's marble and then now I want it to be wood. So you keep kind of changing the base, but the concrete is still there. The concrete is not going anywhere. I have this section about meaning that is really interesting to me. So it's easy to conflate our lack of meaningfulness in one area with the way we perceive life as a whole. But let's not do that. We can feel unfulfilled at our job, but still have a fulfilling life. But if we let it, our discontentment can become all-consuming. This is also, I feel, something that is very prominent in our society today.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I think it's because we've somehow become one-dimensional in a sense, where it's like, I'm a working person, or I am a homemaker, or I am like a really good friend, which are all amazing things to be. But I think when we place so much of our identity on one role, then what happens is if that role is no longer fulfilling, we end up experiencing life as a whole not fulfilling, because we, in our minds, have one role and either it's going to be good or it's not going to be good. And I think that's just meant to say, like, be careful with the narratives you play in your mind. Understand that you have multiple roles. Understand that you can derive meaning from multiple things in your life. I think when we think about meaning, we think like one big project that we're going to accomplish, and that's going to give us a sense of meaning. And that's just not true. First of all, your meaning will change. What gives you meaning will evolve, just like you will. And second, it can come from so many different things. And I just want people to be kind of open to the idea of, like, you can derive meaning from many things. And if you figure out that it's not coming from one place where you expected it to, okay, like, sit with that, figure out if you can change it, adjust it if you need to leave it, but also don't stop ignoring all the places from which you can still find meaning.
Is meaning, did it change for you with the years?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it always changes. So my work has been a really grounding thing for meaning. I feel like that's where I find the most of my meaning, and I'm really cautious with that because that sometimes makes me work too much or only think about it and, not invest as much as my private relationships, which, I noticed when I was first starting off. But I think, for example, COVID was an interesting one. I lived as a nomad for so long, and traveling and the freedom and the new experiences is where I derive my meaning. But that also meant that I saw my family very little for a couple of years. And I love my family, but they were just not the main source of my meaning. And when COVID hit and I realized that we were going to be separated potentially and that I wouldn't be able to hang out with them, I went to Australia right before the borders closed. And I was stuck there for 14 months, but it was great because I ended up relocating there. And I realized that where I derived so much of my meaning was my family. And that was a complete shift for me that happened really suddenly. And that's not to say that they didn't always give me a sense of meaning, but like it shifted where it's like, now you're a higher value, a higher priority, and I derive and I get so much from these interactions, and it means so much to me. And this is how I think I can give back to the world and whatever. And so, yeah, I have little moments of like, oh, this is now meaningful and didn't used to be, or not as much. And it keeps shifting.
How would you suggest people to recognize what brings meaning? What does meaning feel like physically or, internally? Like, how to recognize it?
There's value in it. There's a reason you're doing it. And I think we all find things meaningful without thinking about it. I think it's only when we can't find it that we're like, oh, shit, what is our meaning in life? But most of us do things that are meaningful all the time. It's like almost not something we cognitively even think about most of the time unless we can't find it. And so if you think about your day, for example, and how you spend your average Tuesday, whatever, you wrote it all out, all the things that you did, you'll be able to see what your values are so quickly. Like, this is a really easy exercise. you will find things that you find meaningful on there, because that is where you invest your time. If you feel fulfilled, that's a bonus. Sometimes we try to live out our meaning and we don't do it in the best way. But I think most of us will just spend time on things we care about. That's what it feels like, a pull towards doing that one activity. So spending time with that person, working on a project, you'll feel motivated to do it.
I love the exercise. It's a very simple way to let kind of your body tell you what made you feel good.
Exactly.
When I was sitting down and thinking about my own self-loss experiences, I was thinking about the different phases of my life. So when my parents got divorced and I kind of had to start my adulthood early on, when the independence kind of kicked in, when I became a mother, I've experienced self-loss. So there were very specific periods in my life that caused it. So those are big events. But are there any other things that can cause self-loss?
I think transitions are not an easy way, but like a common way to feel lost when you take on a new role or a role is taken away from you. But I think self-loss, when it's tricky, is when you don't know why it happened. So nothing big happened to you, and yet you're still completely lost. I think that's one of the scariest experiences. And I think that's in part what happened to me. Like, yes, I had the war, absolutely. And then, I had my parents' divorce, absolutely. But then I had like a decade where I was just kind of chilling. And I think what made it really difficult was like, where in this process did I go so wrong? And I think that's where the little decisions make all the difference. Quietly, subtly, accidentally, passively making decisions that have nothing to do with you for a decade will lead to self-loss. Unless you're acting authentically, you're acting inauthentically. There is no middle ground. There's no like, you're kind of just neutral. No, if you're not deliberate and authentic, you're inauthentic. And if you're inauthentic for long enough, you'll be lost, even if it's tiny little decisions like going out when you don't want to go out, having sex when you don't feel like having sex, not thinking about what you're eating or how that makes you feel. All those little things can eventually lead to you not really understanding the person within.
That's why I wanted to focus on the smaller decisions, because I feel like a lot of us, when we make those decisions, we don't think about how it's going to manifest itself. We're not thinking we're contributing to our self-loss, right? A lot of the times it's, I'm just being lazy, or I'm just this, or I'm not going to do this. Oh, it's fine. I'm going to give in. I'm going to, be this person's friend. I'm going to surround myself with certain groups. So you make these small decisions that you don't think in the long run are going to make a difference, but you're contributing to that disconnect from yourself. And then it takes a long time to recognize that there is a problem, because like you mentioned, on the surface, everything is normal. And then it takes time to take responsibility and understand that you created that problem by all these tiny little decisions. And I'm sure that if we think about the concept of self-loss more, we'll actually be able to recognize while we're making those decisions, like those small decisions will all of a sudden will become more meaningful. It will make us live with more intention, because we don't want to continue building a ladder towards that self-lost land.
Man, that was so eloquent. That was
Damn,
beautiful.
you know what? That was, I don't know where it came from. That was,
I have nothing to add. Yes. You do my press. Like, amazing.
The ladder to self-lost land.
I mean, I love it. That was great.
I loved the part where you mentioned about you moving from self-awareness to self-attunement. That was very interesting. First of all, I have to be honest, I Googled self-attunement and I don't think that word exists. Does that exist? Because when I tried to, it kept on like changing my my spelling. So to me, it was a sign that it's not known enough. It's not out there enough. We don't use it enough. So can you take me a little bit through the process of that self-awareness to self-attunement?
Yeah. And I think I say something like the transition between self-awareness and self-attunement are actions. I'm really like annoying in how repetitive I am, but that's because I really need to drive that home. It's great to be aware. right? Like that is the first step. I always say like the first step to any change is awareness. If you don't know what's happening, you're not going to be able to change it. Attunement is acting in accordance. So being attuned, if you think about a piano that's not tuned, it sounds off. Attunement means that all the strings are functioning properly and you have pressed the correct chords. And so it's that transition, it's that action that takes us from I'm aware of what I need to do to I am attuned with myself through my actions.
I'm aware of what I need to do to I'm attuned to my actions. Okay.
Or I'm attuned through my actions, through them.
Okay, because I want to give the example from the book and I'm going to read it. This is odd because I'm reading your own thoughts. I mean, your
I love
thoughts.
it. It's so great.
But I'm
It's
reading
weird.
it to you. Get used to it. A year after I started seeing my therapist, I remember sitting on a stoop, journal in hand, crying with frustration that I didn't know what was wrong with me or why I hadn't healed yet. I'd done all the things that I thought I was meant to do. I'd left my unhappy marriage. I'd started therapy. I journaled and traveled. I made all the changes I could think of. So why was I still hurting? Why was I still lost? At that time in my life, I felt rushed to purge all my pain, to heal everything right away. I was correcting all the major mistakes I'd made, but I was still not fully encountering myself. The thing I can see now is that I wanted to recognize my essence, but I wanted to do it without coming too close to it. I was ready for the work to be over already, but it was just beginning. That to me was, because I think that there's a lot of us are out there, doing the work. You left your, a relationship, you're going to see a therapist, you're journaling, you're doing all the things. What was that?
I can still remember I was in Venice. I remember this like it was yesterday, and I remember what the journal looked like, and just being like fuck this. Like what else am I supposed to do? And I think that's when you are not willing to hold yourself, like the most inner part. Like so many of us, even when we go to therapy, we work on symptoms. We try to fix ourselves. We try to earn our love. We try to fix things through our routines. And what we're not doing is really, really looking honestly at who we are and the pain that comes with that, the discomfort that comes with that, the joy that comes with that. I wasn't good at emotions. For me, that meant not fully encountering the whole truth quite yet and not fully taking responsibility. That's what it was. I was so happy to do the prescribed things that I thought would make it right, but I wasn't taking responsibility for the way that I was existing or trying to figure out what that meant. I was like, this will fix me, so I'll just do it. There wasn't that intuitive, I'm going to wake up and see what works for me or not. What is my inner self saying? Is that person actually good for me or not? There wasn't that grappling of I hate you. If you think about it as a genuine relationship, it's like having those conversations, it's like trying to have sex with someone, but not being in the same room. Do you know, that's
Right.
a terrible example,
Yeah.
but it's
No,
that's what
that makes sense.
I was trying to have intimacy and closeness, but keep myself at arm's length by doing all the right things that weren't actually encountering me, my genuine pain, or placing the responsibility on myself that was actually there.
Do you feel like that's the breakthrough that happens with people when they go to therapy for many years? Because someone can go to therapy for so many years and it's just kind of going through the motion. And then one day, something clicks.
Look, I like existential therapy. I'm just going to advocate for it for a second because it's so responsibility driven that that is the click we need immediately. That is the click we're waiting for, because unless you realize the intimacy of self and the responsibility of self, everything else is like putting a band-aid on a wound, in my personal opinion. And so it's that breakthrough of it's going to get so messy, but it's not just going to get messy for a second. It's just going to be messy forever, because life is absurd and has so many unknowns, and life is whatever you wanted it to be. So you're in a paint studio covered in paint and you're not going to wash off anytime soon. I think until you get comfort in that state and until you find beauty in that state, it's so hard. I remember my therapist, we were sitting there and I was crying one day and I was so upset. And she said, wow, this is really beautiful. And I remember just being like, what did you just say to me? And she's like,
Wrong word.
Yeah, I was like, what do you mean beautiful? Like she was like, oh my God, that seems so hard for you. And like, here's a tissue. Like she's like, this is really beautiful. And I was like kind of shocked. And she's like, Sarah, until you see pain as beauty, you're gonna have a really hard time with life. And I remember for the first time, like after my breakthroughs and I was working, I remember crying. It's a theme one morning and then just being like, wow, this is so beautiful because it's actually for the first time allowing me to feel myself. My tears are showing me that I'm alive. My tears are actually bringing me that intimacy and that closeness, and I'm seeing the value in them and I'm seeing the beauty in them. And that day was a huge breakthrough where I found beauty in the mess. And I think that as humans, unless you find that, you're going to have a really hard time navigating life because it's not about one routine. It's not about just that one boundary. It's not about figuring out who you are and then being that person forever. And I think like my discomfort with all the mess was what prevented me from healing for a very long time.
There is something empowering about knowing that we've shaped previous versions of ourselves, even if they do not serve us. Why? Because that means we have the power to shape who we want to become.
Mm-hmm.
I love that one.
Yay! It's one of my favorites too.
I love that one. I love that we are giving ourselves the power back. So let's talk a little bit about what are the prerequisites to having a sense of self.
So we have acknowledgement, appreciation, and justice. And I think this is an important point because a lot of what we're seeing with inauthenticity and inner work is very isolated work. And I think this was a really fun introduction of like, you do need other people to exist and to form your sense of self. But it's also about the balance between what you offer yourself and what other people offer you. And someone needs to acknowledge your existence to confirm it. It really just shows like the complexity of that. Like if you are a child and you're neglected, like that has serious consequences because someone threatened your sense of existence. When someone ghosts you, it's why all these things feel so visceral, even though you logically know like they just didn't text me back or they just didn't say hi. But it's like if someone genuinely knows you and then they ignore your presence, that's like a negation of your presence. That's a really threatening, scary experience. We have appreciation. I think it's important for people to know the distinction between like just being acknowledged or being noticed and then actually being appreciated for who they are. That is the most validating experience. I think we all need people who genuinely appreciate us and who will go to bat for us and who will be able to see us the way that we see ourselves in that moment. That's a really powerful experience. And then we have justice, which this is an interesting one if you look at it from a societal point of view, but you need to be treated fairly in order to preserve your sense of self. And I think about how many times we don't treat ourselves fairly and how much damage and how much we climb that ladder to self-loss without realizing it. And so when people say like, would you treat yourself like you treat your best friend? And that's become so cliche, but that is really actually important. It's like, are you treating yourself fairly? Are you treating yourself like you would treat someone you genuinely love and respect? And are you showing this sense of self that it is worthy of your time and your affection and that you will protect it from things that are imposing on it?
The first one was
acknowledgement, appreciation, and justice.
Acknowledgement, appreciation, and justice. Prerequisite to having a sense of self. We need to program this into our brain.
I think so too. We need to teach kids this. We need to teach parents what it means to actually acknowledge your child, appreciate your child, treat your child justly so that they can go through the journey of developing their sense of self without having to fight off the impositions, the expectations, and just the threat that they feel.
We cannot expect attention without attendance.
Oh, so many people want to be seen, like genuinely seen for who they are. I think it's a really basic human need, but they're not showing up and they're not showing people who they are, and you're just not going to get it. It is not the other person's job to figure out who you are secretly by reading into texts or your behaviors. You're not entitled to other people understanding you. It is a very vulnerable thing to be seen, and most people want it. And then when it comes to actually doing it, they realize how scary it is, and then they don't do it, and then they're not seen, and then they their sense of self is questioned. So I think vulnerability plays a really huge part in this. It's like you have to show up. Otherwise, nothing will happen.
Give me a real life example.
So I have a client I had a client who was very upset that like no one truly understood her. People never really gave her time of day. Men weren't that interested anymore. And she just didn't know why. She's like, no one sees me. I feel like I'm invisible at work. People walk past me at bars. No one approaches me, whatever. And I remember being like, yeah, you know what? That absolutely blows. But what I see of you, and I see you, once a week, you're amazing. You're hilarious. You like have such a big personality. You're a great storyteller. Like it makes no sense to me that no one would see you. Like, why am I seeing something that other people are not seeing? And why are they not seeing what I'm seeing? So we just kind of had this conversation. And then I went, well, do you show them this part of yourself? Like, do you actually express your opinions, your thoughts? Do you make the jokes? Do you sit with the same posture? And the answer was no. And so I think it was like this realization of like, I want people to see me, but I don't want to be vulnerable enough to actually have to show them. So I think I'm funny and I'll do it in like the privacy of my own home or in a therapy session, but I won't show others because what if they don't like the joke? What if they're offended? And what if they reject me? And so that's an interesting, and I've had so many clients like that. That is not just like one person. That's like a story of a bunch of clients put together.
I feel
but
it's
like,
a common thing. Yeah, I feel like it's very common.
Super common. So you got to show up if you want to be seen. Otherwise you can't. It's not on anyone else. It's on you.
We cannot expect attention without attendance.
Yes.
Okay, let's talk about one topic that we talked about before, because again, there's a lot of confusion, a lot of fluff around the term. Let's talk about boundaries. So what are boundaries?
Yeah. I say boundaries are an outline of who you are. So boundaries, they, yes, of course, make relationships safe. They help clear communication, to help you get your needs met. Above all else, what boundaries do is outline who you are if you use them properly. And I think why so many people fail at boundaries is because they'll get a workbook on boundaries and then just go to town and make boundaries that don't really matter for the context or are not authentic or not actually meeting their needs. And then they'll be disappointed and they won't be able to keep them. But I think a really important connection between boundaries and the self is that boundaries are an expression of self if they're done correctly. And if you tell someone, I think I had an example in the book of like, let's say this is the first time you met me and you don't know anything about me. And I sat here and I gave you 10 boundaries. I think you'd have a pretty good idea of who I am. And that's really cool. If you can sit across from someone and then tell them 10 boundaries, and that wouldn't actually tell them very much about who you are as a person, they're probably not appropriate or effective boundaries.
But in order to set boundaries, you have to have an understanding of yourself.
Correct. And this is why and it's the chicken and the egg a little bit, but it's also going like, I'm going to set a boundary with this person because I don't think they align with me. And I need to stay true to myself. And so then the boundary becomes a way that you confirm who you are. So they work together. It's the action that solidifies yourself. But one of those actions is a boundary. And then you have a much clearer idea of who you are. And I think in the book, I talk a lot about reflexive boundaries just because, everyone else talks about boundaries. So I was like, let's do something a little different, which is reflexive boundaries, which are coping mechanisms. They're boundaries we set without realizing we're setting boundaries. So many of us set boundaries by our actions or our humor or how we present without realizing what we're doing is setting a boundary because we're feeling hurt, we're feeling threatened. So we diffuse the situation by doing certain things and we just go, oh, okay, like that's how I coped with the situation. It's like, yeah, but you did more than that. You actually set a boundary. The issue is that it wasn't a conscious boundary and you didn't speak it as a boundary. And so that means that, it's running you rather than you're running it. And so just making those unconscious boundaries more conscious and more intentional is kind of where the trick is.
Can you please give me a real life example of an unconscious boundary?
You're having an argument and then you walk away from a conversation. Like you're mid-conversation with your husband and all of a sudden he just walks away. Someone will be like, they're stonewalling, they're this, they're that, that's terrible communicate. Yeah, it's not healthy. But what they're actually doing is setting a boundary. They say, I can't stay here and preserve my sense of self in this conversation. In this conversation, my sense of self is threatened, and I need to remove myself as a way not to get further harmed. It's a really serious thing. It could be because they don't have the ability to self-regulate or they whatever, but it really doesn't matter. What matters is that in that conversation, you've done something that they find so threatening that they have to leave. And that is a reflexive boundary. Now, a real boundary would be like, hey, I don't like the way that you worded that. That really upset me. I need a 5-10 minutes to cool off, self-regulate. Let's resume over tea tonight at like 6 when the kids are in bed. That's a boundary. Reflexive boundaries, I got to protect myself, so I'm just going to walk away because I don't know how to exist around you anymore. And I think, it turns from like a petty behavior, which we usually like, they just walked away. It turns to like a really serious behavior where when you like reframe it that way, you go, holy shit, the experience they just had is so meaningful and so powerful. And I was a part of that. Let's really figure out what happened. And so I think that's an example of like a reflexive boundary.
Oh, that's a great example. It's amazing. Okay. I'm going to be examining all my reflexive boundaries today with my husband.
Perfect.
So speaking of ourselves, and you mentioned before the body, there is such a connection between the body and knowing ourselves. And that's a very difficult relationship for people to build. Why is it so important to make sure that that relationship is intact?
Then I have to answer a different question, which is, what is the body? I think a lot of us have an understanding that the body is something we just have, something we possess, and then we treat it as such. We treat it as an object or a tool. What we don't do is understand that the body is not just something we have, it's who we are. That is such a huge shift. Like, if you understood that your body is who you are, the way you would want to interact with it is significantly different. And I think there's so many narratives that are negative, like mind over body, in terms of like control it, right?
So true. Yes.
Or
wow.
like depending like how you grew up, it's like the body is sinful, control it, don't let the sexual temptations, or don't, like, there's so many narratives that essentially say the mind and the body are against each other. And if there's a hierarchy, the mind is here, the body's here, control it, keep it in check, and it works for you. Like, it is a tool, a thing for you or for other people, which is even worse. It's a way to get love, attention, whatever. So what we have done is stripped away its entire meaning. And so, yes, it's hard to have a relationship with it, because why would you want to? Most people are scared of their bodies without realizing it. Most people only want to engage with their body if it can give them a certain result. And so you can't have relationships like that. If you put that in relationship terms, no one would want to stick around to be used by you or to be treated that way by you. And so I think we have a hard time because we don't understand how significant the body is. We don't understand that it holds equal value as your mind. We don't understand how much it contributes. And we don't understand the fact that you wouldn't exist without your body. Like, let's just sit with that. The reason you have an existence, the reason why you experience your existence is through your body, the lived body concept that I talk about. Like, it's just mind-blowing. So I think the reason why we struggle so much is because we are not taught these things, and we have a huge misconception of what the body is for. And then when people are like, love your body, it's like, what? You don't even have a relationship with it. You don't know what it is. And then
it's again like trying to love something that is like a thing, an external thing. It feels very different than the way it should. I mean, now that you're describing it the way you have, it feels a very different mission.
A very different mission. Then people, will, if they, like, when I had anxiety, I was like, my body's out of control. My body can ruin me. I realized the power of my body for the first time, where I was like, oh, she's not joking around. Like, there's, and I had to come to terms to realize that my body wasn't trying to hurt me. Actually, my body was trying to warn me. And without those panic attacks, I'm not sure I would have snapped out of it. So I look very fondly, although it was the most horrifying time in my life. Now I look very fondly on that time where I'm like, wow, my body showed up. She was like, you're done doing this nonsense. you're not getting any other clues I've given you. Snap out of it. I'm going to make you feel like you're going to die unless you change. And she did. And then I changed. And so, like, your body steps in, right? And I don't think I'll say she, I don't think she ever does it out of malice. And I think if we were attuned enough with ourselves and self-aware enough, she wouldn't have to do it as abruptly. But so many of us have scary experiences with our bodies sometimes, and then we think it's like against us and something we have to control. And I think also educating people of like, your body usually steps in when it's time for a change. Your body is usually screaming a message you've been ignoring. Of course, there's instances where that's not true. And, you know, like, we're not talking about like diagnosable things, but like, I just think it's so, yeah, it's pretty crazy. I think I realized her power for the first time, and I was like, oh, she's real, and she is so important, and she needs to be a part of it. And it was a really tough relationship to rebuild for me.
How did you go about building that relationship? How do people can go about building that relationship?
Yeah. And I mean, I think we do a pretty great job of like trying to get people to just engage with their bodies. I think there's a lot of like methods out there, like meditation and yoga and dance and breathing. I just think we're kind of doing it for the wrong reason, or we're not sure who we're connecting to. Like, I think most people do those to connect to themselves, not to connect to their body. And it's like, well, they're one and the same, but you can't treat it like you're just like, it's a spiritual thing purely because your body's there participating, and you need to acknowledge that. So what I did during COVID, which is so embarrassing, I got my clients to do it too, it was really fun, is like pick a song that matches your mood. So let's say right now you're feeling a little anxious and peeved or whatever. You get like an angsty Avril Lavigne song, really outdating myself, whatever, it doesn't matter. Like, pick a song that you want.
I was just screaming Avril Lavigne at the top of my lungs in my car. So yes, I'm here.
Okay, amazing. So, right? And it's like, now move your body. This is a great exercise. Don't have a mirror next to you. You can stretch, you can dance, you can scream, you can jump, do whatever you want, but do it only when your body wants to do it. And if you're feeling in a lovey mood or a sexy mood, put on a song like that and do things only when your body wants to do it. And I think it's just experiencing your body as something that has a say, experiencing your body as something that like has a personality, experiencing your body as something that like you can listen to and you can have fun with and build a relationship with. It was really cool. So I make my clients do that sometimes. But breathing techniques, scanning your body, all of these things, like if you scan your body, you'll know what your body's feeling. If you're around someone and you go, oh, I'm feeling all sorts of ways, but I'm not sure what, scan your body. Where is this person making you feel in your body? That can be so telling.
All very actionable, easy. I mean, not easy, but available things to do. Yes.
Yeah.
I love this quote from the book. Life is messy and complicated. We need to let go of the idea that being human is easy and straightforward. Let's stop pretending there are definitive answers to all of life's questions, or that we are all headed to a single destination of happiness or success.
I should start writing Hallmark.
This makes me so happy because I feel like you really are the only one. I mean, I've been following you on social media for a while, and I feel like you really the first one that I've seen out there that was like, being human is so freaking hard. That's just what it is, it's messy and crazy and chaotic, and and it's so beautiful to say it out loud and to remind yourself of that.
I think we just need to stop being ashamed of like life being life. And I also think we need to enjoy it. And I think it's a liberating thought. And I'm so done with all the pretenses and all the solutions that are out there. It's like 5 ways to completely. And it's like, maybe, but like, you're also not a project. You're a living, breathing, always evolving human being. And you're supposed to experience life, and there's no right way. Like, if, it's like, there's not one way to live your life accurately or rightly or whatever you're looking for. It's like, or successfully, whatever that means. It's yours, and treat it as such. And it's okay if it's hard. And I really want people to like, chill out and just take a deep breath and just release all those expectations, because I think it's so much more fun, and we become a lot more forgiving then. It's not like, why couldn't I do it? It's like, oh yeah, that's right, it's messy, it's hard, I'm gonna screw up. Cool, okay, what's next?
Right. You're like on an adventure, every day is something else. Every season is something else. I would love to close the episode with you already gave great exercises or things that can be done, but are there any specific existential exercises or practices that you would recommend to people that are slowly embarking on that self-discovery journey?
Yeah, the one exercise I really like is the one I talk about in my book, which is the armchair exercise, where you just sit on a chair or a bed or a floor, and then you talk to it. You see how it feels. Then you see what it's trying to say back to you. Then you see how you feel about what it's trying to say back to you. Then you talk back to it, and then you go back into your body and see how that felt. And I know that sounds absolutely bonkers saying it out loud. So it's a really hard exercise to describe. So buy my book and figure it out. No,
but yes, buy the book. Yes.
But yes, please. No, I think just realizing that any experience you have tells you something about you. You don't need to be on like a yoga retreat to figure out who you are. You literally have to wake up and just pay attention to like, what piece of clothing did I put on today? What did I feel like eating? What was this conversation like? Wow, I really like this bench and how it feels. What is my body telling me about that? Or what emotions is it evoking? Every single thing around you gives you feedback. And so for me, it's like, be open to life. See what life is telling you. See how you feel just encountering it. Because the question I love at the end of the day is like, what did I learn about myself? That's my favorite check-in question. Like, what is a new thing that I kind of picked up on? What is like something I wasn't sure was me, but now I feel like is me, or I thought was me, but wasn't me? And it's like, what did I learn about myself? That I think is like the most fun existential check-in questions you could do.
So good. Sara, I love talking to you. One day we're going to go on a trip to God knows where, and we're just going to sit and talk.
I really want that to happen for us.
Thank you so much for your time. I honestly love the book. I'm so excited for people to be able to read it and go on this journey, because I truly feel like it's easily digestible and very action driven, but then also really gives you permission and opportunity to talk to yourself and your body and acknowledge, all the things that you are. And I think that's so powerful. So I hope you're very proud of this.
Oh, thank you. I am very, very proud of it. And thank you so much for having me on, and congrats on your amazing podcast. I'm very honored to be here. So thank you.
Thank you. And then last thing, where can our listeners find you?
Yeah. My main platform is definitely at millennial.therapist on Instagram. You can also find me on Substack, where I'm doing more existential content that's a bit more long form, and I love it, and it's really fun, and that's just under Sara Kuburic. And you can find my book anywhere they sell books.
Yes, it's on
Yay.
me.
It's
love
on
it.
me.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Don't miss my newest episode right here. And if you're listening to the podcast on Apple or Spotify, please go and leave a review with your biggest takeaway. I love reading your thoughts. And if you have any suggestions for guests or topics, you can leave them in the comment section. And always remember, you are not alone.